Good morning, Year 4. Welcome to our next English lesson. I'm going to share my screen with you. It's Tuesday, the 12th of January, and today's learning objective is to write sentences with fronted adverbials. So if you could pause the video and write this as your learning objective, please. Brilliant. Now, you'll notice I put this sign here because this is our adverbial sign, and we're just going to review fronted adverbials, which we have done before, but we're just going to be using them today to describe more of our story of the ant animation. So let's just review a little bit. So what is an adverbial? So I'm going to read it to you, but you could pause the video and to reread it back to yourself. An adverbial is a word, a phrase, or a clause that is used like an adverb to modify or to change a verb or a clause. Now remember, a clause is the part of a sentence which has a verb in it. Adverbs can be used as adverbials, like for example, suddenly or quickly. But many other types of words and phrases and clauses can be used in this way too, including prepositional phrases, which we've been talking lots about, and subordinate clauses. Remember, the subordinate clause is the part of the sentence which doesn't make sense on its own. So what is a fronted adverbial? When an adverbial is used at the beginning of a sentence, they are often called a fronted adverbial. So you can move adverbials around. Remember, we've talked about that before. Okay, now let's have a look at some examples. So fronted adverbials are used to describe the time, the frequency of something, the place where something happens, the manner in which something happens, and the possibility. So for example, if you go back to the time something happens, so before sunrise, Darius crept into the beast's cave. The frequency, how often something happens, so every so often, Darius would hear the beast's ferocious snore. The place where something happens, at the back of the cave, the terrifying creature began to stir. And the manner it happened, quick as a flash, Darius bounded behind a nearby rock. And the possibility, or how likely something is to happen, almost certainly the deadly beast would find Darius. Okay, so let's have a look at an example. So what is wrong with this sentence is what my question is. It has got a fronted adverbial in it, but it's not correct at the moment. So let me read it to you. It says this: slowly and carefully they released the juvenile badger back into the wild. So pause the video and perhaps have a chat with your grown-up and notice what is wrong with this sentence. Well done. Now, hopefully you have found what's missing. And I talk about this lots in Year 4, don't I? Well, what is missing is it is missing its comma, isn't it? It should have a comma. Let me show you. There should be a comma there, so it's missing it. Slowly and carefully, they released the juvenile badger back into the wild. Now, remember, this bit here doesn't make sense on its own. Slowly and carefully. You wouldn't go up to someone and say, slowly and carefully. Would make any sense, would it? But you could go up to someone and say they released the juvenile badger back into the wild. So that bit makes sense on its own, doesn't it, if that had a capital letter? So we do need to make sure that that bit, like a subordinate clause, this fronted adverbial does need to have a comma after it. Okay, let's move on then. Let's practice that, shall we? Let's have a look at some sentences. So I've got three sentences here, and they're all missing the comma in the correct place. So where should the comma go? So read it out loud and then think, where would the comma go? Perhaps you could write it in your book so I can see where the comma would go in your writing. So do that for each of them. Then, as a challenge, can you find out what type of adverbial these are? Do they describe the time, or the frequency, or the manner, the place, or the possibility of the action? Now remember, there's going to be a different one hidden under these boxes here. So pause the video, write out the sentence and put the comma in, and then have a go at the challenge. Well done. Why don't we grab a purple pen and see if we mark it? Okay, I'm going to take my purple pen. So without a doubt, Billy was going to finish the race in first place. So without a doubt is our fronted adverbial, and the comma goes there. Out in the field, the horse and her new foal galloped. Out in the field is our fronted adverbial, so our comma goes there. On Tuesday, class 12 are visiting the Imperial War Museum. Well, on Tuesday is our fronted adverbial, and so our comma goes there. Okay, now the first one, this first fronted adverbial without a doubt. It is a fronted adverbial which measures the possibility of something happening. This next one measures the place, or tells us where it happened out in the field. And this one here tells us the time when something happened, on Tuesday. So today we're going to write using fronted adverbials. So if you need to remind yourself at any point what a fronted adverbial is, you can come back to that slide here to look at the type of fronted adverbials that you could use to see if yours works. Okay, now let's go back to our model of excellence that we read last week, our precocious penguins. And we're going to see now if we can find any fronted adverbials in here. So you might need to, if you have printed this off, you could highlight it. If not, you could just point with your finger on the place and tell your grown-up where those fronted adverbials go. So let's find one together. Let's read it, first of all the way through. At the very bottom of the earth, the winter winds were beginning to lessen, and a clear azure sky stretched across the icy plains of Antarctica. Imposing ice structures meandered menacingly through the freezing waters, while an eerie silence filled the air. Perched perilously on one of those icebergs was a colony of penguins huddled together for warmth, yet alert for the next fishy feed. The patient penguins' eyes darted to and fro across the lapping waves so that they wouldn't miss any potential food or foes. With alarming speed, an ominous black fin darted through the waves and began circling the penguins. Someone else had smelt his breakfast. The finned giant emerged further from the ocean's depths and opened his deadly mouth with its razor-sharp teeth. Swimming quicker towards the penguin colony, the killer whale readied himself to fill his belly. Suddenly, one clever penguin had a cunning idea. With an urgent shout, the penguin ordered the colony to work together. Shuffling steadily towards the edge of the ice, they tilted the great ice mountain towards the watery depths of the ocean. Just as the finned giant was about to gorge on this delicious feast, his enormous jaw smacked into an icy wall and his breakfast dreams sank with him. Okay, now we're looking for fronted adverbials. Now the clues there is that it's an adverbial that's at the front of a sentence. We don't have to look very far to find them. They should be quite straightforward to find, but not everything at the start of a sentence is always a fronted adverbial, so be careful when you're doing it. So I'm going to find one to start you off, and then I'd like you to pause the video and see how many more you can find. Okay, so at the very bottom of the earth is our very first fronted adverbial because it tells us the place where the story is starting. Okay, so pause the video now and see if you can find any more. Well done. Okay, let's go through and see if we can find any more, shall we? At the bottom of the earth was the first one. Let me have a look. Perched perilously on one of those icebergs, again telling us where something is happening, was a colony of penguins. With alarming speed, another fronted adverbial. Just see my going. Swimming quicker towards the penguin colony tells us how it's happening. And with an urgent shout tells us the manner in which the penguin is ordering his colony to work. Shuffling steadily towards the edge of the ice tells us how he's doing it, how he's moving. So that's a fronted adverbial. I think that's all of them. I think I found all of them, but you might have found one more, but I think I've got them all there. Okay, let's move on then to our next slide. So now we're ready to start writing about our writing with fronted adverbials. So we're going to go back to our film. We're going to be talking today about that's part of the scene where the anteater sucks up the little ant. Do you remember? Well, let's watch the film again and then we can see exactly what I'm talking about, so we can really picture it in our minds before we start writing today. Right, so this is the part of the film we're going to be writing about today. Stop, stare, hurry over, and then they make a little sphere. Okay, now that's the bit we're writing about today. Okay, and we're going to do it slightly differently today. We're going to write some sentences using fronting adverbials, which we'll put together. So the very first sentence we're going to write about is this bit here where the anteater starts to suck furiously the ants towards him because he wants to eat them up, doesn't he? So here I've got a sentence, but I've blanked out the fronted adverbial. I've hidden one behind there. So let's see if you can think of one that should fit in there nicely. Let me read it to you. So something, 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 comma, the anteater imagined feasting on the delicious ants. Right, so pause the video now and see if you can think of a fronted adverbial that could fit there. Okay, well done. Now, hopefully you've thought of a fronted adverbial which describes the manner or the time or the place or something like that. So let's see what I came up with. Sucking with all of his might. Okay, sucking with all of his might, the anteater imagined feasting on the delicious ants. But that's not the one. You could come up with another one. That is just the one I've come up with today. Okay, so let's go into our next little sentence. Okay. Now, what I'd like you to do now is we're going to write sentences to go with each of these scenes here. Okay, so this scene here with the little ant or the young ant, and he's holding on tightly because he doesn't want to be dragged away and gobbled up. And then all of a sudden, the rest of his band of brothers, the other troop of ants, they turn around and they almost gasp, don't they? Although we can't see them gasping, but I'm sure they are gasping. Their eyes are widening. They're really shocked and they're staring back at him to see what's happening. And then we have the queen ant, don't we? The leader ant, and she starts directing people. She starts telling them what to do. So what I'd like you to do now, and this is going to take a little bit of time, and you might want to talk to a grown-up or phone a friend to help you with this. I want you to write 3 sentences, 3 really good sentences. And I'd like you to come up with sentences that do have fronted adverbials to describe these scenes. Okay, so describing exactly what's happening in each one of these scenes, but obviously starting with a fronted adverbial. This might take a little bit of time actually, okay, so don't rush it. But again, it's not a paragraph you're writing, it is a sentence that you're writing because these sentences are all going to be packed together to make one paragraph. Okay, pause the video and have a go now. Okay, right then. Hopefully you've come up with some really nice sentences and I look forward to reading them later. But let me show you the sentences that I came up with that might help you if you have been a little bit stuck. So here we have the ant holding on. So I wrote this sentence, quickly grabbing a nearby branch, the young ant saved himself. So here is my fronted adverbial. My next one, staring back in alarm, the rest of the ants watched on helpless. They don't know what to do they, until they're told what to do by the queen ant. And then finally, without hesitating, the leader whistled to her troop while signalling. Well, that should say signalling wildly with her hands. So that's a little typing error there. So I'm going to have to cross that out and you can change that. So I'm going to put a little pop, an SP there, because that's a spelling mistake that I've noticed just now. And then you can correct it. Okay, so these sentences here are my sentences, but if you need to magpie bits from here to help you today, you can do. Okay, now I'm going to put all 4 of my sentences together now to start forming a paragraph. So this is the 4 sentences that we've just done, and I've put them together and I've made myself a paragraph. So let me read it to you. So sucking with all of his might, the anteater imagined feasting on the delicious ants. Quickly grabbing a nearby branch, the young ant saved himself. Staring back in alarm, the rest of the ants watched on helpless. Without hesitating, the leader whistled to her troop while signalling, again, I need to change that, wildly with her hands. Okay, now we're not quite finished with this paragraph. I'd like you to independently write a little bit more now. I'd like you now to write the next little section, this picture here, where they all come together and make a ball or a sphere. And I'd like you to just spot another spelling mistake there. Oh dear. Okay, so I'd like you can change that as well. So we're writing now to this point in the story where the ants make a ball. Okay, but don't write any more than that because we don't want to write to the point where the ant falls over. That's tomorrow's writing. Okay, so we don't want to push the plot on. We're just going to write up to this little bit. But when you write this last little paragraph sentence, you again can use a fronted adverbial. Okay, now remember, check your work through just like I have, because you might spot that there's mistakes as well. But that's okay, because that's what writers do. They do sometimes make mistakes and they do have to check them and they do have to correct them. Okay, so I look forward to reading your work later, and happy writing.